the way that I isolate habits and layer drills, and this is sort of if I were to sum up everything that I try to do with the players that I work with and teaching them how to make more shots, this was the sentence that I came up with, like isolating habits and layering drills to build better new habits. And so I want to go through some of the process of what that looks like with you now. A couple of things before we get into it. Let me back up a second. This is me sharing the way that I do things now in a simple form that's easy to understand on Zoom and through PowerPoints. My goal here isn't to convert you and to get you to do things exactly the way that I do them. The reality is I do this way right now, and I myself am trying to grow and get better and explore other and better ways to do things. The biggest challenge that I face here is the presentation has to be a little bit semi-organized and logical in its flow, but the reality of working with a player is it's not always linear or logical. That ideas that I'm going to present later on and make them appear like they come at the end of the process may be used early on in the process. So don't take this word for word. Don't feel like you need to do this exactly the way that I do it. Take ideas from this, take inspiration from it, and use it to augment or grow the way that you work with habits, and then challenge yourself to find better ways to do it still. So I want to go into a little bit of the science behind motor learning and some of the things that I really focus in. Every player is in the red section here. They're into performance training. They're playing basketball regardless of their level. They are capable in their skills, misguided though they may be, and executing them in a performance training sort of way. To learn new habits, to improve the micro skills that players have, we need to take them back into the blue section here, the coordination training section, give them a chance to re-coordinate the way that their muscles fire and execute a new skill. And then slowly, as their skill improves, start to introduce some of the variability that occurs in games. And so we start in the blue and we learn how to execute a new micro skill, and then we start to introduce more variable training. We maybe go back to the blue section, into the green, deeper into the complex training, back to the movement variability, and just trying to progress towards performance training. And our goal as coaches or my goal as a coach, is to find the appropriate level of challenge for where the player's skill level is in that moment, and not do drills that are so simple that they're not challenging the player, and not do drills that are so hard that they're just reverting back to their old habits, but find the appropriate level of difficulty to grow their new skills. So I've talked about micro skills here, and I want to go into a little bit of an explanation of what I mean by that, in case you're not familiar with that term. The game is made up of bigger skills like running, dribbling, passing, shooting, rebounding, defending, and each one of those skills is made up of micro skills. So within shooting, there's a skill in, can you get on balance? Can you get the middle of your hand on the middle of the basketball? Are you skilled in spreading your hand out wide? Can you get your guide hand off the basketball? Can you create a lifting motion? All of these little things are micro skills within the skill of shooting. If something is a micro skill, or if something is a physical habit of any kind, it's a micro skill. And because it's a micro skill, you can work on it. So we're not limited by what our current habits are or our current micro skills are right now. If we can identify something as, okay, I have trouble spreading my thumb out when I shoot, no problem. You've identified it. Now create an environment where you can learn to do this differently. I have trouble getting my guide hand off the basketball. Perfect. You've just identified something. Let's create an environment where you can actually work to do it differently. Most players, not all, but most players are capable of doing just about anything. If factoring in physical strength and maturity and all those things, but most players are capable of doing anything. They're just not necessarily capable of it in certain environments. So an example would be they're capable of getting their guide hand off the ball, just not when they're moving quickly and they've got a defender chasing them. When they don't have time and they've got somebody rushing them and they're a little bit off balance, they go back to their old habits and their guide hand stays on the ball. So if we can identify some of these things, then we can start to work on it. So the first thing that I try and do when I work with a player is, and we've identified the micro skill that's holding them back, is really simplify the environment and strip away all of the layers that occur in games, so that they have a chance to execute this new micro skill differently. We don't want to just keep going back to the old habits. We actually want to grow new habits. I always try and focus on going back further than I think I might need to, as opposed to not going back far enough. So I will err on the side of stripping away every single layer that makes the game of basketball the game that it is, and create a really isolated skill that we get to progress through, rather than just trying to go back a little bit, finding that I didn't go back far enough, stripping away more layers and giving the player the impression that we're constantly regressing. In other words, I'd rather go back too far and allow them to continuously make progress than not go back far enough and make them feel like we're constantly regressing. And then I really want to make sure that the player, when we isolate a skill, has time to actually get good at this new skill. I really worked to avoid the expectation that I'm going to explain something to you, and because my words are magical, when I explain them, you're going to be able to go out and do them. And I try and constantly remind myself that my words are not magical, and that a player needs time to get good at something simple before we try and do something simple in a complicated environment. So once I've isolated the skill, and that can be as simple as, okay, my guide hand doesn't want to come off the basketball. Perfect. Put the ball up at your set point, get your shooting hand underneath the middle of the basketball, then take your guide hand off the ball. Like, isolate that skill by starting close to the hoop, slowing down, and just focus on finding a position with your shooting hand where you can take your guide hand off the ball. That would be what isolating the skill might look like. If the bad habit that a player has is their feet get too close together when they shoot the basketball, perfect. Let's move in, let's slow down, and I want you to just stand with your feet wider apart. Get comfortable with that. Get better at shooting out of that position, and just strip away all of the movement, all of the things that occur in a game, so that they can just get comfortable with having their feet wider apart. If it's that their thumb doesn't get wide when they shoot the basketball, they get a narrow thumb, then no problem. Grip the basketball, slow down, move in, give all of your attention and all of your bandwidth to getting that thumb wide apart, or wide. Put it on the basketball, take your time, get comfortable with making a move with your wide thumb. Really, and I'll say this in clinics, isolating a habit is so simple that it's easily overlooked. And in many cases, it's as simple as, okay, what's your bad habit? I don't get my feet wide enough. What does isolating it look like? Put your feet wider and then shoot. I don't bend my legs when I shoot. Okay, awesome. How do we isolate that? Bend your legs and then shoot. And sometimes we don't appreciate how simple a situation might need to be in the beginning before we start to grow. Now, once the player starts to get comfortable with these different positions and the moves out of them, I'll start to add in the layers that make the game of basketball the game of basketball. So first will be, I'll add in distance. A player has started very close to the hoop in a simple environment so that they can get better at the new micro skill once they're showing proficiency. If we're doing that at 8 feet from the basket, great. Can you do it at 9 feet? Then can you do it at 10 feet? And just paying attention to, are they actually executing the new micro skill, or are they going back to their old habits? And are they doing it well? Like, are they getting good, the physical habit, but also getting good results in time? And if either of those aren't happening, then I need to simplify a little bit more. And so I'll start with pro players 2 steps inside the free throw line on their first day. And poor Tristan Thompson had to shoot from that distance, basically the bottom of the jump circle, for a good 3 to 4 weeks before we started to move back. And once we started to move back, he moved back about 4 feet in one workout, just because the habits were in place and he was able to execute them in a more difficult environment. So first thing I'll do is I'll add distance. The second thing would be adding speed. In the beginning, I allow enough time for the player to give all of their bandwidth to whatever the micro skill is that they're trying to change. So slow down, take 30 seconds to make sure that your feet are set up wider, or take 30 seconds to make sure that your hand, as much time as you need. And then slowly, as they get better at finding that position, okay, perfect. Can you get your feet set up in 3 seconds instead of 30? Can you do it in 2 seconds? Can you do it in 1? Can you find it immediately as soon as you're given the basketball? And just slowly adding speed, not let's do form shooting, let's jump to game speed, but progressively asking them to just slightly do things a little bit faster. And the last simple layer that I will start to add is just a little bit of movement. And with everything I do, I try and start with the easiest idea and progress from there. So the first simple movement that I will add would be hopping forward on 2 feet. Forward, because at least it's energy working towards the hoop. Hopping only, not because jump stops are right, but because I want the player to be able to set both feet at the same time. I feel like it's easier to learn to push evenly with their legs, which is my ultimate goal with the player's legs. I feel like that's easier to do if they're getting set up at the same time. So I will start with just hopping forward, then learning to hop to the side, hop to the other direction, hop while rotating. Hop while rotating in the other direction, step forward, left, right, step forward, right, left, step to your right, step to your left, step while pivoting, and just progressively making these situations more difficult. But in the beginning, just one step at a time. And once we start moving, and I'll talk about this more in a moment, we have to remember to we're not just practicing the movement, we're practicing the micro skill with the movement. So if a player has their guide hand off the ball, I'm not just working on getting their guide hand off the ball. I'm not just practicing moving, I'm practicing getting my guide hand off the basketball while moving. And so we have to keep in mind the micro skill and not just practice the situation. Once we've gone through those 3 layers, so we're starting to add distance, we're starting to add speed, we're starting to add a simple movement. I'll start to add more layers that make the game the game. So the next levels would be adding catches and dribbles. They're kind of the same thing to me in a certain way, because a dribble is basically just a pass to yourself off the floor. But within each one of these, they have their own micro skills. And so I want to allow time to focus on the micro skill of catching, the micro skills within catching the ball or picking up a dribble, and the micro skill that a player is working on within their shooting mechanics. So getting their guide hand off the ball. And this is where players really start to, they think they're working on the skill of catching or shooting off the catch, and they forget that they're working on the skill of getting their guide hand off the basketball while working on the while catching the ball or picking up a dribble. Within these situations, you can start these slowly as well. And I'll start usually with catches and progress on to dribbles from there, um, because it's just a little bit more advanced version of the same principles. With catching the basketball, I will start with the slowest pass that I can possibly give a player and just roll the ball along the floor to them. So now they have 4 or 5 seconds to remember the micro skills that they're working on, set up their body appropriately, work on the micro skill of catching the middle of the basketball, and then executing the micro skill within their shot that they're working on. And so there's a lot of things that could be going on there, and slowing down the process so they have a chance to get as many of them correct as they possibly can. And then starting to introduce a little bit more speed within the dribble. The roll will start to speed up. It becomes a slow bounce pass. It becomes a quicker bounce pass, a slow chest pass and a quick chest pass, starting to introduce movement. In the beginning, the roll will be right to the player. Then I'll roll off to the side and make them incorporate movement and the catch, and introducing the variability that occurs in the game. And so just a reminder, don't just practice the skill of catching the basketball and shooting, but practice the micro skills within the catch or the dribble and the shot as well. So don't just practice the situation, practice the skills within the situation. Once we're past that point, and this is something I'm really trying to challenge myself with, and figure out how early on in the process can I introduce these two ideas. I'll search for ways to make it much more random, much more like a game. And Chris Oliver with Basketball Immersion has been instrumental in my development in this area, and I'm certainly nowhere near his level, but trying to grow and trying to get better myself. So the next 2 layers and the final 2 layers that I'll think about adding are defenders and decisions. So can a player execute these micro skills when they have a defender trying to stop them? And can they execute the micro skills when they don't know what they're going to do next? And so many times in practice, we practice a preordained routine. Like, I want you to slide to the baseline, 3 slides, catch the ball, and shoot it. And players have no trouble executing good habits in that environment. But when all of a sudden they don't realize or they don't know what's going to happen next, and they have to drift to the baseline and shoot, all of a sudden the habits go out the window. So can we start to incorporate decision training within drills so that the players learn to execute the micro skills they're working on within a random environment? These can occur in stages, and here's kind of how I build, especially defenders. I'll say to a defender, like, just make the cut uncomfortable, or even the first half of the cut. The player's going to cut this direction. Make the cut a little uncomfortable as the shooter gets into the cut. Just back off, give them space, let them have that time and that bandwidth to shoot the ball. Then as they get better at that, okay, guard the entire cut, but as soon as the shooter catches, peel off, give them space. Then add in the defender to say, okay, you can guard the entire cut and stay in the shooter's space, but you can't touch them and you can't try and block their shot. To guard the entire cut, stay in their space. You can contest, but you're not allowed to block. To playing live defense. I will also, with decisions, and again, Chris Oliver is a far better person to discuss this with than I am. I will focus on, in the beginning, just a simple, if I put my hands up, that's a dribble drive. If I put my hands down, then you've got to shoot that. So I'm going to pass, and I'm going to do one of the 2 things. You've now got to remember as a shooter to execute the micro habits in that environment when you don't know what, am I dribble driving or am I catch and shoot situation here. So the better the cues that you can give can mimic the game, the better off you're going to be. So theoretically, you could give a cue that says, if I blink twice with my left eye, that means this. And if I tug my right ear, then that means this. That would be an okay cue, but it doesn't really apply to the game. I try and go hands up, hands down. I'll use hands up and a hand out to say, this is the space, drive this direction, like drive to the space, not the direction you think I'm pointing. And then I will use the feet. So if a player is dribbling at me, I will lift one foot or stagger one foot out in front, and they have to read which is a high foot cut in that direction. And I'll use my body positioning as a cue. If my shoulder's level with yours, that's a spin move or a crossover. If I'm behind you, you're going to continue that drive, and just trying to help players read cues similar to a game while remembering to execute better habits, until hopefully one day they don't have to remember it. The habit is just ingrained.
Coach, I just want to stop you there for 1 second. Yes. A couple of questions on the micro skills. The sequence of the micro skills, let's say an individual has a few things that they need to fix on their shot. Right. What's the sequence that you would go, let's just say legs are off-centered, bounces forward, guide hands in front of the ball. Do you fix one thing at a time, or are you going to fix everything and then go through those habits? I guess is one of the questions out there right now.
I mean, this is the ongoing challenge. So there is no one answer to this. There are players who, well, the one answer I will say is I won't give more than 3. Okay. And then it's, okay, what's the most important habit? Which is the one of all of these things that they have to work on? Which is the one that if we could fix this is going to cause the biggest improvement? And then are the other ones related? Like, are they turning their feet because the ball is coming off the middle of their hand and they're getting energy this way and energy that way, and they need to work on both of them? So there is no one answer. If I'm sequencing something, I usually start with cues at the bottom of their body and work my way up. So I'll say things like, okay, good feet, thumb wide, lift. Sort of in the order in which they occur in the shot as the cue within that drill. So I do try and also let the player know, and I'll say this sometimes in the beginning of a workout, you're allowed to make every other mistake, but today I want all of your attention to see if you can bend your wrist back on every single shot. You're used to being here, we're working to get there. Make every other mistake, but don't make this one. And then if you're able to do this well and something else, great, but this is the priority. And so that's sort of some of my thought process on that.
That makes sense. If someone has bad, if you were watching someone shoot and they have bad micro skills, let's say the hand placement again, but they shoot the ball pretty well. Obviously, the goal is to score baskets, but if they shoot it and the form's clearly broken, are you going to try to fix that? Are you going to leave that? What's your thought process on that? I know that we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but
yeah, no, this is a good question. This is like the only thing that matters is the result in games. And so if a player has demonstrated that they can get high-level results in games consistently, then I don't care how they do it. So if I think their shot is broken, but they can make 40% of their threes in games, I'm not going to touch it. But at the same time, we have to be aware as coaches of young players that just being a good 12-year-old does not guarantee success at 16. And so we have to be a little bit forward thinking on, okay, now this kid's really good. He gets great results in games with terrible form at 12. But when the game speeds up, will he still be able to get good results, or she be able to get good results at that next level? And we never know. It's an educated guess that we're constantly taking. But the easiest way to kind of find out, play against the next level. And so get that 12-year-old to play against 14. If all of a sudden they can't make a bucket, then we've got to clear indication that those micro skills at that speed are tough to sequence. And the great example of this is Lonzo Ball. Lonzo, coming out of college, had Darren just commented this thing. So coming out of college, he made 42% of his threes, and everybody said, "Oh, he's a good shooter." And I was working for Orlando at the time, and our assistant GM asked me to take a look at video of him, and I almost kind of threw up in my mouth a little bit. And so I thought, like, this guy is a 42% 3-point shooter, like, and then he got an indication, but wait a second, he's a 67% free throw shooter. So why, if he's such an elite shooter, as 42% would indicate, why can't he do this in a controlled environment like a game? And is that an indicator that when the game speeds up, he's going to really struggle, and then all of a sudden he comes to the NBA and struggles to make 30% of his threes for the first couple of years, because all of a sudden the smaller windows and the speed and the length of the defenders just magnified his flaws to the point where he wasn't able to control them anymore. So we never know the answers to that. Reggie Miller, a lot of people have probably said throughout his career, like, hey, he's got to change. But he proved that he could control his motion. So did he really need to change? No, probably not.
Agreed there. For younger players, U14 is the question. What is the main thing you concentrate on? I know a lot of coaches are torn, bottom half, top half, finish. If you were focusing on just one piece for younger kids, what would it be?
So let me start with a little younger than that. If it were 12 and younger, I wouldn't worry about hand position or even guide hand or any of that stuff, because I don't think they're strong enough to be able to do that well anyways. So I would want to focus more of my attention on getting the players into a good foot position where they're on balance and they're strong and they're stable. Hopefully win that battle so that when they're 12, they're now in a stable athletic body position and able to shoot well out of that. Now they're into that 13, 14-year-old range, and hopefully they have good habits with their balance, and we can give all of our attention to hand placement, getting the guide hand off the ball and starting to win that battle. What I don't want to do is fight both battles at once and lose them both. I'd rather pick one, and the younger the player is, the lower in their body I tend to start. So young players, I would go with feet. As they get older, more into hand position and more into the shooting motion.
Makes sense. Do you want to keep going? I got a bunch of questions popping in.
I've got like two more slides left.
Let's keep going.
I'm happy to finish answering as many questions as we want.
Let's do that. Sorry.
Okay, so we talked about the different layers, that adding in speed, distance, movement, catches, dribbles, and at that point, catches, dribbles, and more game-like movement. So expanding the movement beyond one step, and then into decisions and defenders. And again, I've made this seem linear, but this is like you're constantly playing with these layers. So I try, and even with guys I've been working on with for years, at the beginning of each warm-up, we kind of go through the simple layers. Like, here's your biggest bad habit. Let's get 20 shots where we focus on executing that as perfectly as we can in a simple environment, and then grow the environment. And that becomes sort of the beginning, the first 5 or 10 minutes of our shooting warm-up. The goal within your workout is to find that appropriate level of challenge. There's no sense saying, hey, I'm working on synchronizing my legs, and you've created drills where the player can't synchronize their legs. At that point, you're paying lip service to what you say you're working on. You're not actually working on it. So find that appropriate level of challenge, and understand that we're not going to fix anything in a day. It's about progressively getting better. And if that takes 2 years to progressively get better, especially with youth players, that's time well spent. They have years to get better. So spend the years. And that's idealistic at the same time, because I know you're probably not working with the same players year by year, but hopefully as a country, we can kind of take that approach. When you're playing with the layers, always feel willing to add a new layer and subtract an old one. So when I'm adding the catch, I'll slow down. When I'm adding speed, I'll move in. And then so I add a new one. I let the player get comfortable with that layer because I've simplified something else, and then I slowly start to add in the one that we subtracted. And sometimes that's over the course of 10 shots. Like just, hey, let me help you learn to catch the ball here with your feet wide apart by us just slowing down a tiny little bit. And then as you get, okay, find the sequencing of it. Okay, perfect. We're going to speed back up. And again, try and use cues that mimic the game as much as possible, as opposed to cues that don't really mimic. So this is sort of a glimpse into the way that I do things. I have a lot of ways that I want to continue to help you. If you're not already on my free shooting newsletter, you can go to coachdavelove.com, sign up for that. Right away, you get a free gift, 7 micro skills that I think every shooter, regardless of their age, gender, or form, needs to be working on. So you can get that on coachdavelove.com. You can check out my online products in my store on coachdavelove.com/store. I've got video shot analysis, which during these times has become very popular, where people are now sending me video of their shot, and I'm able to record my voice as we watch this, as I watch the video, and talk about the habits that I see, and how to go about improving them, what to work on, what to prioritize. And I give you about a 15-minute video back with my voice and all the drawings and the video played in slow motion. So you can get video shot analysis, or you can get an online workout program, which are basically each 7 workouts worth of progressive drills that go through this process of isolating a skill and building habits to improve your balance, your guide hand, and your release, or your arc. And so those 3 programs are available. If you use a promo code SOCIALDISTANCE10 with a capital S and a capital D, you're going to save 10%, just as a way of my way of saying thank you to Golden Ticket and Basketball Immersion and all the people in Canada Basketball for supporting in this strange time. Then hopefully one day we'll get back to normal. And if you'd like to host one of my clinics I do around the world, you can sign up for the newsletter and contact me through the newsletter. So again, social distance 10 on coachdavelove.com/store.
That is awesome. Okay, you ready for questions?
I'm ready. How long do we have? I've got like, I can go as long as you want. So
yeah, so we'll go maybe 15 minutes here, give the next group enough time. So we'll just start hammering through them. This always happens with you. You get bombarded. That's the way it goes. So let's just start here. Okay. At the college level, what micro skills would you focus on to speed up a player's shot?
I would focus less on the speed of their shooting motion and more on their efficiency of the shooting motion. I don't think realistically you can speed up the motion without generating more force, and we don't always want more force on the basketball. That's going to cause it to go farther. We don't always want that. So speeding up isn't what I'm after. It's being more efficient and wasting less time. So things like being shot ready, and making sure that we're not taking steps after the ball gets in our hands, being able to catch the ball cleanly. I'll, even with pro players, spend a lot of time where I just gently, standing 3 feet away from them, just gently toss them the basketball and have them focus on catching the middle of the ball with the middle of their hand so they can lift straight up. And then adding variability where, okay, can you now do that when the pass is outside your body? You catch it here. Can you do that while you're moving? And so just finding more ways to be efficient.
Okay, perfect. Regarding the index finger on the center of the basketball, does the finger hand positioning apply on the catch, at the set point, or the moment of the release, or all of the above?
This is such a good question. in a perfect world, all of the above. But basketball is not a perfect world. So what needs to happen is we have to have the middle of our hand underneath the bottom of the ball at the release. If you can have the middle of your hand on the bottom of the ball at your set point, that's going to make it easier to find your release. If you can get the middle of your hand on the top of the ball at triple threat, that's going to make it easier to find this position, which is going to make it easier to find that position. But this isn't always possible. So we are going to have to catch the ball in the outside of our body, not on the middle of the ball, and then try and find the middle of the ball as we're lifting. I focus a lot of my attention here at that set point to hopefully, I think this is the first place that we have really good control over our shot and the environment, and then hopefully we can get through this position to a consistent release.
Okay. What's the main difference between, this is a good one, I see it all the time, main difference between females and males shooting?
If I were to make generalizations, I would say the main difference is just that there tend to be, for no good reason, some female habits and then some male habits. And I'll give you some examples. And I understand these are vast generalizations, but I don't think they're negative or positive either way. So hopefully nobody takes offense to this. I tend to see girls that finish, even if they start with wide feet, they finish with their feet right together. They tend to jump and then finish with their feet side by side. Whereas boys, we tend to like to, even if we start with good feet, tend to finish with the right foot as a right-handed kicked out in front of us and on that left leg with her leaning back. The physicality of how I teach, like what I teach them, no difference. Like the positions would be the same, but I do have to keep in my mind that like the best example I can give it, when I was working with the Orlando Magic, I was also working for the University of Calgary women's team. And so I had high level, I had a 20-year-old male player and a 20-year-old female player that I was working with at the same time. The male player was 6'9", the female player was 5'2". And so we do have to kind of keep in mind that just because this is an older, high-level female athlete, she may not have the physical strength of a male that is 6'9", and so I just have to kind of keep that in mind, that I may need to allow the 5'2", 20-year-old female or negative things to the power to shoot a three-point shot than I would necessarily the 6'9" male. And this is not my area of expertise. This is something I'm working to get better at. Just the way that I teach them, I might be slightly more empathetic with a female. I only say slightly because I think I am very empathetic anyways. And so that's not much of a stretch for me to do that, but I'll be a little bit more aware of females' feelings, right or wrong. I think you can push a guy a little bit more, but you risk losing the female if you push a little bit too hard, whereas a guy might like the challenge of that. And again, I don't think any of those are better than the other. I think it is a generalization that is different from athlete to athlete. Notice how I really kind of chose my words carefully as not to offend anyone on those.
I've coached male and female, so I definitely understand the difference from 6-year-old level up to 18-year-old level. And sometimes, honestly, they're exactly the same athlete, right? Sometimes their motor is the same. So no, great answer. Question coming up here. What when you see a player that's I would classify it as streak shooter, someone that's really hot one game, really cold the next day. If you were watching that player, what would you watch for, knowing that they're a streak shooter? Something's probably off somewhere in that shot. What would you be looking at?
I always go back to the general principles I try to work behind are positive and negative energy. So positive energy is any energy that any part of your body creates that goes at the target, straight at the target, or straight up in the air. And if every part of your body could generate only positive energy, we'd never miss a shot offline. They might miss longer shot, but if every part of our body could only generate energy this direction or that direction, every shot would go online. Negative energy is energy that's flowing any other direction except for these two. So 1 degree offline this direction or that direction, that's negative. If we give it to the basketball, it's eventually going to push the ball away from the hoop. So I'm looking for what parts of their body are generating negative energy. And usually we get with streaky players, we get them where they have a big scope. They create big energy in one direction and cancel it out with big energy in the opposite direction. And when they are able to synchronize those two, they're able to create this. But when they're not, they end up with that and the ball's going offline. So on good days, boom, they got it. And on bad days, they don't, because they've got too many things trying to cancel each other out.
Makes total
so
sense.
Just trying to identify what those are.
Yep. Question here. How much film do you use when you're helping reinforce progress with a shooter?
Honestly, not a lot, and I am trying to get better at that. I think it is valuable if the player learns that way. So you kind of have to feel out with the player. Do they? Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. You have to figure out, do they learn visually?
Right.
And a lot of people do, but some don't. So if they don't, then the video might be lost on them. The nice thing about it is there's two things that don't lie: video and statistics. And so I had a player in Orlando that said to me, like, I was trying to explain to him that a particular shot, it was a 3 off the dribble, that it wouldn't really want you shooting 3s off the dribble. And he says, but I can make it. And I said, well, you shoot 8%, which was the actual number, like for that season, like over 150 attempts, you're making 8% of those. So if you can make that, please tell me when that's going to start. and if you can't give me a date, then let's just admit that maybe 8% isn't a valuable shot and stop shooting those. So you can't really argue it at that point, and you can't really argue from what you're seeing on video. Like, no, I don't get I get my feet wide. No, you don't. Here's video of you. Your feet are right together. So I do use a bit of it, and I'll do it within workouts where I have my phone. And I've had some great moments where with one player trying to get, he leaned way to his left when he shot. And I said, okay, we're going to try and get straight up and down. I asked him to do it. He went back to leaning to his left. I said, no, straight up and down, like try and get your spine straight up. And he leaned to his left. I said, all right, try to leaning to your right. And he went like that. And I said, no, that's straight up and down. He says, no, I'm leaning way to my right. And we finally just grabbed my phone. And I said, all right, lean to your right. And he does this. I took video, flipped it around, and we both burst out laughing as he said, oh my God, it feels so much like I'm leaning that direction. And that's accurate. It feels that way, but that's not true, as hopefully they can see.
About the new travel rules allowing the step back or even the double step back, thoughts on drill shooting on that? Now, obviously a very advanced skill. Is that something you would be working on with your guys at an elite level, or what's your thoughts there?
Me personally, no, because the players that I work on or work with tend to be the weaker shooters. And so if you're shooting a step back 3, you better be making 40% of your threes across the board before that becomes a valuable shot. And if you're making 40% of your threes across the board, then you're probably not working with the shooting coach. So my list of players that I would work on that with is pretty small, just because we get superstars that are able to do that at a high rate, but we don't get a lot of players, the average player at any level, that is actually a valuable shot. That it looks fun and it's awesome when it goes in, but it doesn't go in often enough to justify shooting it often.
We got time for about 3 minutes here. I'll give you a couple more, Coach, if you're good.
Sure.
Um,
Rapid fire round.
okay, yeah, rapid fire to end
I'm
it up.
terrible at rapid fire.
Yeah, me too. Preference on footwork on shooting. So 1-2 or hop. Why
No
or why
preference.
not? No preference.
No preference. I think the player needs to know what they're comfortable with, and when they have time, they should do that. They should know what is most efficient within situations, and when efficiency is key, do that. And the efficiency will be different in different situations. And then we also need to practice the wrong footwork, because sometimes those happen in a game, and we still have to be able to make the shots.
Okay, perfect. How do you work? Do you work on the mental side of shooting, or are you usually working on the technical part of the shot?
I work on the mental side subtly there, where I'm just constantly planting seeds about developing confidence and breaking out of slumps and setting the stage uh, for um, for things that might happen in the future. But I'm not having overt conversations where it's okay, let's talk about the mental side of shooting. I'm just constantly planting a seed with players so that they hopefully have tools to get through things when they need them.
Okay. Concerns with dipping the ball. Do you care?
My only concern is that if we present that as a hard, fast rule in either direction, I don't want players dipping the basketball when they're standing underneath the rim. So I don't want to tell any player that you should dip the basketball. I don't want a player who's not strong enough to try not to dip the ball at the three-point line. You will need to drop the ball down to generate enough force to lift it up and get it to cover the distance. And with longer shots, you need more force. So you're probably going to need the ball lower. But it does waste time. If you catch the ball here and drop it down needlessly, you've just wasted a quarter of a second. So it's not a hard, fast rule. It is dependent on the shot that each shooter is shooting and the general habits. I just want it to be as efficient as it possibly can be.
Okay. We'll probably end on this one here so that the next group can get ready. But how important is proper balance when shooting? This coach focuses mostly on follow through, backspin, and arc, which are all great. They've seen big improvements. Would they be better to focus on the balance, or what would once again, this goes to the question, what's the most important piece, I guess?
You're not necessarily going to be better off by focusing on it, but should it be a part of what you focus on? Absolutely, because basically your balance is your ability to control your body. And so the analogy I give to players is, imagine Steph one end of the floor shooting on the regular floor, and then magically somehow I'm able to have the same Steph Curry on the other end of the floor on a dock in the middle of the ocean. Which Steph Curry is going to make more shots? The guy in the middle of the ocean rocking back and forth, or the guy standing on the floor stationary? This guy is. Why? Because he has better balance. So being in a foot and body position that allows you to not be at the mercy of the game, but be able to control the game.